Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Understanding CBD. I'm your host, Stephen Wallman from Wallman's Apothecary. If you remember, we do very high quality tinctures, hemp extracts. You can see the details of our labels. A little blurry there with a full cannabinoid terpene profile QR code that takes you to the lab report, something that's unique in the CBD space. Very excited, again, as always, to be here. Thank you for signing in and watching this video. The reason we're doing this video today is called Cannabis Infused Butter, and we're going to have our special guest, Rita Lynn, take us on a step-by-step guide, give us instructions. And I get the question, Steve, if you're doing CBD, why are you teaching people how to make cannabis-infused butter? And it's very simple. We make our products from hemp. And it's a great place for people to start. Very low THC, very well tolerated by people. However, in most cannabis dispensaries, they have some edibles. A lot of them have sugar. They may have ingredients you may not like. They also may have flour you may not want to smoke. So being able to make your own edible is very important to be able to complement and control your use of CBD. So you can titrate in a little bit of THC as needed to get a more complete cannabis product for yourself. So we had Rita Lynn talk about it last time, about how she used her cannabutter, and it was just overwhelming, the amount of people that were interested in hearing about it. So without any further ado, we are going to bring in Rita Lynn.
Hello, Stephen. Hello, everyone. Thank
Hi,
you.
Rita. So happy to see you all the time. You have such a great smile on your face. You can't help but light up the whole channel here. So for those that don't know, Rita Lynn is a cannabis caregiver. She's a meditation expert. She has a YouTube channel, and you can look it up by her name, Rita Lynn 420. She does daily meditations. If you haven't seen it yet, you definitely should log in and try. And very good. Very glad you could be here today to kind of break off some of the fear that people have about making their own products, making their own edibles. And you're going to take us from the hey, I just went to the dispensary, I got a bag of weed or pot or whatever you want to call it, cannabis, and you're going to help us transform this into an easier way to consume it. And I can't wait to hear and watch what your process is there.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me back. I really appreciate being here, being able to share with your community and our communities. So thank you, Stephen, very much. What y'all are doing at Wallman's is really a beautiful thing to see, the quality across the board and patient, having the patient's wellness in mind and not, we know with products, we can easily, and obviously we need to profit. And so that's beautiful that you are, but that you always keep patients first, and you have just been doing it right. And so anyway, that's why I'm here. Thanks for inviting me back. And I do, in my daily routine, I start with this every day. At this point right now, I'm using the CBDA. So that's a beautiful start to my day. And this is actually how I start my day. When I wake up, a glass of water, and then I get into butter, either with my coffee or breakfast. And it's really easy. It's been an easy way. Number one, I don't have to actually buy edibles anymore. I just make them. Number two, I know what's in my edible. When you get edibles at the stores, dispensaries, anywhere, basically, there is limited ingredients listed, and that's okay. Again, sometimes there's proprietary formulas they're using, whatever it may be, but they don't really explain every single thing that's in the edible. And for me and my holistic center, I really value knowing exactly what is in the products that I'm putting in my body. I use it for medical reasons and health, wellness reasons. And so I don't want to be putting things in my body that might be disturbing my wellness. So I always make sure that I know exactly what's in everything. Edibles can be a little overwhelming in the beginning. When I first started, I definitely wasn't hip. I wasn't at my wits about the numbers and calculating exactly what was in the edible as far as milligrams. And so in the beginning, I was in so much pain when I was starting to do this in my kitchen. I honestly didn't care how much was in each edible. I got the butter, I got the flour, I Googled some things, and I started experimenting years ago. So all of this has just come from experimenting, also reading books. I have a few cookbooks I'll share with you where I get my recipes. And when I do bake with my butter, I'll show you the recipes I use and a couple of ones that I've made and that come out really, really wonderful. But the majority, what I do with the butter is microdose. So I'm putting 2 to 5 milligrams at a time on a piece of toast with my breakfast. And so that's my adding the cannabinoids into my body. I do, again, I mentioned CBD first. And the reason I use CBD first, there's obviously different kinds of CBD, but regular CBD, not CBDA, I noticed does help me be able to just not have as much psychoactivity when I'm microdosing. And for me, for functioning in any area of my day, I really want to be as functioning as possible, but as pain-free as possible as well. So
yeah, that's a good point. And I wanted to stop on a few things. One, the intoxicating component or the euphoria that comes along with cannabis is what a lot of people think is the medicine, but it's really it's a side effect of cannabis. So for people like myself and Rita that are using cannabis as medicine, we don't want the intoxicating component because that really isn't, there's medicine. I mean, it's beneficial, not taking anything away, but for the most part, when you're dealing with pain or a certain condition that you really need relief from, it's not like a pill that you might take that just gets you effed up and you forget about it or you just don't think about it for a little bit. There's actually a lot working in the endocannabinoid system. So that was one thing, and thank you for saying that. The second thing is you mentioned you start with the Walman CBDA product, and I think that's a good time to talk about the flour and the decarboxylation process.
Yes,
so
thank
what
you.
the CBDA means and THCA means,
right? Yeah,
that can be confusing for a lot of people.
Thank you for that lead in. Yeah, that's perfect.
We're getting good at this.
It's true. Yes, thank you. You're so wonderful. I'm so glad to be here. But yeah, so when you look at your label, if it's Maryland medicine, it will have a label. So you will look at your label, and there's always going to be the first line is THCA. And most people would think that is how much THC is in this flower right now, and where if I were to eat it, I would have that much THC active, but it really isn't active yet. THCA means the acidic form. So it does need to be activated. And, the most common way is to grind it up and maybe smoke it would activate it real quick, because smoking it heats it to the level that it needs to be activated. Now, when you're cooking with it, you have the option. You don't necessarily, I've experimented a couple of ways. Decarboxylation is what is basically just heating your flour to where then it is active. And there are benefits even when it's not active. It's still very anti-inflammatory. And there's health benefits with it not being activated. So technically, if you shred this up and say put it in a smoothie, it's still going to really be good for you. It can go a lot farther though once you activate it and cook it down, because then you're converting it into just a larger quantity of medicine. You're breaking it down from grams to milligrams, and then we have a bigger quantity. But for decarb, it can be really, really simple. Most people wonder, how long do I cook it, and what if I burn it, and can I burn it? Yes, you can. I have burned it before. In the beginning, I used the stove method, where you decarb in the stove, and so you just use a metal tray. We would grind our flour and then put it on the tray, and then you bake it. You basically put it in the oven. I would cover the top with aluminum to keep all of the terpenes and whatever could possibly get out of there in the plant. And then I used the 240 degrees for 30 to 40 minutes. And I did that for years. And then once I started kind of growing and learning more, I was introduced to these. I got the magical butter machine.
Wow, an evolution. Wow. So that's not a coffee maker over there.
Right. No,
Okay.
these are machines that I actually use to make edibles now. I've shortened the process. Then when I would use the stove and the stovetop method, it was just a longer process. There's more chance of overcooking because maybe you might lose track of the time. Maybe you might, like in the beginning, I didn't even realize if I left the tray in the oven, it would continue to cook. Right when it's done, you got to get it out of the oven. Even leaving it in there for a little bit extra can burn it. So you turn off the oven and you want to take it right out. But with machines, honestly, the magical butter machine doesn't decarb. So I was a little disappointed
Really?
when I bought that, thinking, oh, it's all in one, but it's not. You're still going to need to decarb in the stove method, or buy a decarb machine.
This is a hard question. I don't know if you know the answer. I'm not sure I do. Like, how would someone know if they need to decarb or not decarb?
So that is, most people decarb because they want the effects of the psychoactivity.
They want the euphoria of it.
And euphoria, right.
The intoxicating part of it.
Right.
So, I mean, I remember in college when we took, we just ground some weed up. We threw it in the brownie mix and baked it. And everyone's like sitting around waiting for this to happen. And we're like, it doesn't work, like what happened? And then we learned later that you have to do this decarboxylation process. So yeah, there is medicine doing it. So without decarbing, but if you want to feel it, like notice it, you'd want to decarb it.
And there are more studies on that way. What also happens is you can okay, sorry, I'm going to start over. Okay, so I wanted to show the ease and simpleness of this machine, how it decarbs versus the stovetop method. Most people probably know, or in the stove method, most people probably know what that process is, grinding it and putting it in there and cooking it. But with the Lavu, you can actually grind your flour and put it in here and close it, and you put it in. There is a opening at the top, and then you pick activate and start it, and this does it for you. And then you can go right into infusion after that, because your flour will be decarbed. This will be inside, and then you fill this tub with butter. And I'll show you what it looks like.
So when you, there's also, as far as terminology goes, there is a concentrated term of cannabis called butter that is just it's a concentrate. It doesn't have actual, butter in it. It's just a form of kind of like there's shatter, there's rosin, there's diamonds. Butter is a form of an extract as well. So this isn't going to be, just not to confuse things, you're actually using butter that was made from milk and you're going to then spray. Yeah, there you go. Like, good old.
So I usually have, my routine, again, because I've been doing this over and over and over again, I tend to use the same amounts of things. Like, I'll look for the flour that is the specific percentage that I want for my microdosing. And then I'll use 3 cups of butter, or 2, depending on how much of the flour I have. And we can get into that. Calculating is actually not as hard as we think. There's just a couple of things to remember and to calculate.
Here, we're going to pull up this screen here now.
Good.
And
Good.
I have a screen we can pull up. This might help the calculation here. Let me scroll this down here. So this is one, as you can see, it's Emily Collin. She's a nutritionist, and we can put the link down below. Do you want to walk? Can you see that enough, Rita, to walk us through this? Or
I can't see the numbers, the details too close, but I can walk you through just the 3 steps that I do, and that's
okay, go ahead.
And that's and then it's the same process over and over. This definitely can help though, because again, people are not going to have the same percentage of flour that I'm working with. So, and a lot of people are using different kinds of, maybe it's oil versus butter, maybe it's a different amount. So when you're doing your own crafting, definitely use something like this. But if you want a simple way to just calculate it by hand to convert your, find out what you have, what you're doing is converting the percentage of THC from grams, because that's how we purchase it. There's 3.5 grams in here. And then you want to convert it to milligrams. So all you're doing is taking your percentage of THC and multiplying it by 10. And so for today, I used a 24% flour. So I timed it by 10 and I'm getting 240 milligrams. Now that's going to be per gram. And
then you get a percentage of THC in that?
Yeah, right. So it
What
would be 240 milligrams per gram, 240 milligrams, per gram of flour. And then I always account for loss. When you decarb, because of the heat, you do lose, it's proven from the scientific evidence that we do lose some of that. So I usually take off, across the board, it's usually recommended about 20%. So I multiply that milligram of flour by 80%, and then I come up with actually my final milligrams. So 192.
That's good. This has a button for it. How much butter do you use?
So today I'm using 3 cups.
3 cups. Okay, so we're just going to put 3 cups in here. And then this will calculate the milligrams of THC, the total milligrams per teaspoon, and then you can go ahead and create portion sizes, and then it'll let you know. So let me take
and
this.
I can't really see what those are. I don't know if she counts the logs, but there's definitely
my readers too, but all right, let me get us back to this other screen so we can see you. There we go.
Yes.
All right, so I think the point there is a calculation, and you can find it. So when you do make your butter at home, make sure you're getting cannabis, obviously, that's been tested, so you know that it does have, you know what's in it, you know what percentage it is, and it doesn't really matter what percentage you buy, because you just factored in on the calculation, and you can adjust the amount of butter that you're using, and then you'll be able to figure out how much you will get per serving that you'd want to use and spread on your toaster. You'll get to that point as well. So that may have been hard to read for everybody, but we're good to go.
Yeah, but for duplication purposes, it's if you use, say, a 24% flour, and then you use 3 cups of butter to infuse it in, and then we give a little bit of loss in the cooking and heating process. At the end, you will end up with almost 5 milligrams a teaspoon of the butter. So then you can dose it out each day. I freeze it so that the terpenes and the cannabinoids are preserved for longer in the freezer than more the cannabinoids, not the terpenes, so that the cannabinoids do preserve over time, so that while it's sitting there and I'm using it over the 2 months, it's staying potent. So you definitely want to keep it frozen, or at least in the fridge, for that reason. And then and sample and try, the first time when you're not going anywhere, when you don't need to do anything, just in case it happens to be more for you than you expected. You always want to be, careful using it for the very first time until you know what the response your body's going to give and how you're going to respond. Another thing that I've been asked, and it's a great topic of discussion, is does the strain matter? Like today it's Tres Leches, but yesterday I was using Kush Mountains from Rhythm. Last time I cooked was a different strain. So I've been asked over and over again, what strain are you using, and is this particular strain recommended? And so my answer for that is what I'm looking at, and from what the science shows is most important with edibles, is the cannabinoid content. The terpenes based on the scientific evidence, it's not enough of terpenes to affect an edible. Now, when you're smoking it, that might be a different story. The terpenes are released into your bloodstream differently than when you digest it. So there really isn't, it really doesn't matter. Indica, sativa.
Yeah, it's really hard to determine, and we've had a couple scientists and chemists and cannabis doctors on here that really shy away from basing your decision on an indica or sativa or hybrid, because that's not proven to be anything. And terpenes, where they do show in certain studies to have they do have an impact on the human body. There's no question. But which one would be the right and so forth, that's sort of the jury's out on it. So
yeah, and the proof is really, like, if you look at, terpenes in food, you need a lot of it. Like, you would need way more than what's in cannabis. And then if you did have that much of an amount, supposedly it wouldn't even taste good anymore. So, when we're making edibles, we really are looking at the cannabinoid benefits only.
Yeah, that's a fair way of saying it. Not that there wouldn't be any benefit, but don't waste your time trying to select it. Just make it easy. Just get some flour. So if you can get, it's another thing with edibles, it's because you can adjust the dose. If you can get something at a good price,
Yes.
even if they have, sometimes you can get the shake or trim.
Yeah.
As long as it has, as long as it has a lab report that shows you. So the other question that I get a lot is, now you've made the butter, what do you do with all the actual plant material? Does it go in?
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, so if you're just using the stove method, you'll need, this is cheesecloth. And so I used to just take it out of the cheesecloth and freeze it, not knowing what to do with it. I just didn't want to throw it away. But now what I do is take portions of that frozen, what's left, and I put it in my shakes, my protein shakes. And so the whole plant matter can be beneficial for us to eat it and digest it.
Cannabinoids, but the plant material there may still have some other benefits. So you're not wasting it here.
Yeah, and the leaves and the stalk, like the entire plant is beneficial. There are benefits to using all of it. So yeah, my goal is to get the whole plant as much as possible.
Okay. So that's one way. You also, when I was making chocolates, I would decarboxylate it, just like the primitive way, in the oven, a low temperature, like for like 220 degrees, I think, for an hour is what I would do, 45 minutes to an hour. It does. The other question I get is there an aroma when you decarboxylate, when you heat it up? And the answer to that is yes. It does smell like cannabis. So if you are trying to do it covertly and not let anybody know, so I would just take it out. It'd be ground up, and then I would just mix it in with a melted chocolate and put those into little measured trays and be done with it. So you're extracting it into the butter, you're filtering out the plant material, and then you're going to use it in, you'll know how many milligrams are in a teaspoon.
Yeah.
Okay. So I
just make butter sticks with it. Mm-hmm.
Ah, look at that. Yeah, I was going to ask you. So when you finish the machine, does the cannabis butter just drip out of the front or into a container and then you pour it in?
Yeah, I'll put a jar under it like this, and let it go into the jar, and then I pour it into the molds to freeze it if it's a big batch. Yes.
Okay, we got a question here from LinkedIn. And the question is, thank you, Andrea, for the question is, now when making cannabis butter in the decarbox stage, is there a percentage of terpenes lost? If so, what can you say is the percentage? We did sort of talk through that. Now, if you look at the terpene specifically, there's different temperatures that the terpenes are sensitive to. But I can tell you, as when we harvest our hemp, we harvest it in the morning when it's cold. We want to make sure that we keep him out of the sunlight and the temperature as cold as possible. That retains the terpenes. So when you're heating it, you will lose a lot of the terpene percentage, and it's really hard to say how much, but you will lose most of it. And as Rita was just mentioning at the beginning here, let's not be concerned about the terpene percentage because your cannabinoid percentage is the main focus, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And science does show that from what the science we have to look at, that we do lose cannabinoids as well with the heating, not only when you decarb it, but then also when you're infusing your, whatever it is, your butter, your oil, you're also losing a little bit there too. So I usually subtract 20% at the, from decarboxylating. And then once I'm down and my butter's done, I usually just subtract 2 from whatever, like if it's 576 milligrams, I just subtract 2 from that. And that's just, and there's no way, like you said, to really know exactly what's coming out of it unless then I send it off to test, which I haven't, because I'm doing it for myself.
You're not doing exactly
right. So I'm not doing any tests after I cook it, which would be interesting to learn, though.
Yeah. And the other thing is that since the cannabinoids are temperature sensitive, they convert. So it starts out as THCA, you decarboxylate it, it takes that acid off, turns it to THC, and longer temperatures can also then convert it to CBN, which is the cannabinoid that's sort of at the end of the road. So most likely these cannabinoids will also convert. So the edibles that you're making the butter most likely will also increase the cannabinoid of CBN. So that's just something to note as well.
Yeah. Yes. Very true. Yes. And I've known people too that don't decarb all the way. They'll just do maybe half the temperature or half the amount of time, so that they're getting both of the benefits of the raw and the cooked plant, which is an option as well.
Yeah, that's what we do in our Gold Reserve tincture for our CBD customers. We decarb it half the way, so you have some of the raw, some of the cooked, because at the end of the day, we want to get the fullest expression of what we can from the plant. So yeah, sometimes you can have, that's a great point to bring it up.
Yeah. And, I don't know if anybody's thought of this either, but obviously there's, something happens in our body when we eat these edibles, and when you eat this butter, it actually doesn't continue to be THC. It turns into hydroxy-11. I don't know the long name for that, but hydroxy-11 is the short name. But the liver converts the THC into something else, which is supposedly, and science again has shown from what we can see, estimate 5 times stronger, more powerful than the original THC. So that's another reason the edibles tend to last longer, and they are more potent. And that is, unfortunately, though, why some people are reserved from edibles. They're like, oh, I don't know. I've seen the memes on when the edible kicks in.
Right. There's that meme, right? When the edible kicks in.
And it's true, though. I mean, for me, it definitely is true. I did another safety workshop yesterday, and we're instructed to medicate, and so but then we do sobriety tests. So there's a portion where they're like, well, go ahead and medicate extra, and then we're gonna see what happens. And so I used extra edibles, and I'm telling you, when it kicked in and I walked outside, the sky was so bright I could literally barely open my eyes because my senses were just all open. And so and that's why I say try for the first time at home when you're not driving, when you're completely safe.
Yes, and that brings up a good point too, Rita, which is the component of cannabis that goes unmentioned a lot is the factors of your set and the set and setting. That is typically thought about when you think of psychedelics, but it's very relevant in cannabis, because if you're sitting in the same space all the time, medicating and being used to using your cannabis, and then you go outside or change your environment, your setting changes, your experience is going to change. So it's very much a part of your experience when you're there. So if you're eating something and then you go out, it's going to be most likely a different experience than if you're home sitting alone on your couch.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Yeah, that's been proven. And, we don't, know the answers, but I'm pretty sure it has to do with our own endogenous cannabinoids. Everyone has their own cannabinoids we're already producing. So I think that depending on what your body's already doing, and that changes as well each day. Like that's not really set and complete. Like, oh, I have so many endogenous cannabinoids every day. That's not the case. It changes. So even my own medicating with microdosing the same amount each day, my response even changes. The way my body responds to it. Every now and then it feels like a 10 milligram when it's not. It's only 5. So our perception definitely can have a lot to do with it.
So if you want to do it the lazy way, right, and you don't have the fancy machines that you have there, you can decarboxylate it in the oven.
Yes.
For around between 220 and 240 degrees, but a low temperature for about 40 minutes or so, and then it's activated.
Yes, then it's activated.
You can just stick it in your mouth and eat it, right?
Could. I mean, there are people, that I know that do that, and they put it in capsules.
You can put it in capsules. You can put it in anything, right? You can mix it in with a brownie mix. You can put it into something else that would also be able to absorb into the body. Whatever, just mix it with the food. But then with the butter, if you don't have that machine, you can just in a saucepan melt the butter, and then you have the cheesecloth.
Yes.
Put it in. Got it.
Right. And
now, how long does it sit in the butter and the cheesecloth? Do you let it like steep for a certain amount of time?
Yes. Yeah. When I'm standing over it mostly as well, watching, but a couple of hours. Yes. And so that's the reason a machine can definitely reduce your time in the kitchen, and also the chance of error. For me, it helped a lot. It tasted better.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we have another question here from Andrea here. If you're able to have an at-home test, which tester do you use if you do? I'm not familiar with an at-home tester. The equipment that they use that test, to give you an example, when we do a full panel test for our oils, I mean, it's hundreds of dollars for a sample, and it takes time for the analysis to run. There's different types of tests, but I'm not aware of a home test kit. Are you, Rita?
I'm not. I've heard through the grapevine that they exist. I've just never been at the point where I needed to research that.
Sure. Well, if anyone does know and you hear about this, please put in the comments. I'd be interested in learning about it. I think it could be helpful for a number of reasons, even if it's just, even if it's just testing potency.
Right.
I mean, a lot of the testing that we do primarily is for safety. So we're looking for heavy metals, pesticides, any herbicides, or residual solvents in the process of extracting, any mold, mildew, those kind of things. And then also the potency, which is important. How many cannabinoids, terpenes are typically what we measure. There's a lot of other components in cannabis that we don't test for, flavonoids and alkaloids and all this other stuff. But primarily that's what we're testing for. Good question. And I'm sure at some point there'll be some technology out there. It's an opportunity for the right entrepreneur. So if you're entrepreneurial and you're listening, a home test kit, Andrea just said right there, she'd be interested in buying it if it was out there. She's ripping out the cookbooks.
The first one I want to recommend is Medical Marijuana Dispensary. It doesn't obviously sound like it has recipes, but it does. And it has one of the first actual cannabutter recipes that I used. And then there's some really other cool stuff that it tells you how to make. Canna flour, so you can bake, and your flour is actually infused. The cannabis tea, I know you can't see these, so I'm going to read them. I've infused made cannabis tea. And then...
Now, we did a coffee talk last week. We had Stacey Ray, the CBD recipe guru. She did a coffee talk, but we didn't do anything with tea. Is there any secrets in infusing the cannabis into your tea?
No, not really. Because if
it's tea, do you put the butter in the tea?
So sometimes if you like bulletproof coffee, you might like your butter in your coffee, but I really don't prefer that. So when I'm gonna put it into a drink, I use tea. Because it blends well with the cream, I'll usually use cream. It definitely does need to be so THC isn't water soluble. It's you would need dairy or cream, some kind of creamer in it for the THC to actually mix into your drink. Or you might even notice it'll just sit on the top. So just get it real quick before you lose it. But yeah, it's not water soluble. So you do want it when you're making tea or any drink. You want to mix it in with the cream part and then put it into the
Now,
water.
you mentioned bulletproof coffee. Can you talk about that? What's bulletproof? What do you mean for those that don't know?
So as far as I know, it's a healthier version of coffee where you're not using sugar. It's a different way, and it also reduces the how it affects your body in the morning. Like it's a gentler coffee, I've heard.
They use MCT oil, and if you use a blender, you put the MCT oil in and you blend it. And it's if you haven't done it before, I would definitely go ahead and try it because it thickens it up. It makes it a different mouthfeel from the coffee. So if you're like me, like I like black coffee, but if you want to add something into it, to make it a little like a cream like, because it actually changes the color, it lightens it up, and you can infuse stuff into your tea and coffee with it.
Beautiful. Yes. I highly recommend trying that. Anytime you can get it in, I think with food is beneficial. Our bodies process it well with food, and particularly with more fatty ingredients.
And the point you brought up, which is the liver does amplify or makes it more effective in the body. Is at least you'll feel it more euphoric, if you will, if that's the right term. When you eat it, which is actually as far as absorption goes with CBD, it's the opposite. The liver breaks it down because it's a different liver enzyme.
Yes.
It doesn't bump it up; it actually bumps it down. So when customers want to ingest their CBD because they don't want to do it, or whatever the reasons, there's a number of reasons. We suggest taking a little bit more CBD because you're going to get maybe only 10% in versus, let's say, 50%. These are just round numbers if you're sublingual.
Yes, right. But as far as uptake, intramucosal sublingual is actually very quick uptake. So if you were to just let it sit in your mouth a little bit before you swallow each drink, you're going to feel the response much quicker than, say, an edible, where you just swallow it and you're waiting the 30-40 minutes for it to kick in.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
That's another reason I like putting it in tea, because I just sit with it in my mouth. So you can
let it sit in so you'll take a little bit of that and just let it sit in your mouth for a little bit.
Yes. Right. And you can do it with the edible as well, like with butter. Like, I can put the butter in my mouth instead of on toast if I wanted. It just wasn't a very delightful experience. So I just prefer to put it on toast. To me, it tastes better. But there are times when I'm eating my breakfast and I'm medicating with my toast and my butter, where I'm in pain and I'm like, I need this to kick in quick. And I will chew a little bit up and just hold it in my mouth and wait maybe a minute, 2 minutes. And again, the intramucosal is a really quick uptake.
Now you did it with butter, and maybe you answered this. Can you just do it with like olive oil or
absolutely
hemp seed oil?
Yeah. So, the last time I did, I tried this coconut MCT oil.
Yeah.
And infused it into that. Used the same process, and it worked well. And that's actually something that would make the bulletproof coffee probably more better if you're actually using MCT oil. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And you can do so. Tell me about that machine you got. Where'd you get it?
So Americans for Safe Access donated this to me when I started volunteering with them. So I volunteer as co-chair for the Maryland chapter. And so this was donated for my personal use to be able to upgrade my kitchen. Basically, I was still using the magical butter machine, and decarbing in the oven. So this was really great way to reduce my arm use. I mean, I don't really talk about this a lot, but I have a neuromuscular disease that affects my upper body. And so I usually try to reduce my arm use as much as possible. And so then my arms last longer. So this has been helpful because I have to spend less time in the kitchen to actually make my medicine. And so then I can just get it going and I can move on to other things. And it's also safe. That was one of the things, safe, Americans for Safe Access. So I have a home with kids and family. And so when I'm cooking on the stove and in the oven, that could technically be a little bit, there is a chance they could just walk by and try a little bit. So this is a way that keeps it enclosed, and there's no way someone's going to walk by and just take a little lick. I have full control of it. So that's another reason that I've really loved it. And the fact that you can actually go through each process. I can activate my flour in there. Once that's done, I can literally just pour my whatever it is I'm using, whether it's butter or MCT oil, and then push the next button, and then it infuses. And then once that's done, I literally just put my jar underneath here and hit the button, and then it releases all the oil. And then the cleanup is so easy. All you're looking at cleaning up is this and this. You don't have, before I was cheesecloth and you're squeezing everything out and you're squeezing and making sure all your stuff is out. So it's less arm work. Super easy, makes it simple. I do recommend if anybody's at that point where you want a
Do you know
machine.
what the retail price is of those? Do you know how much they go for?
I think they start around 200, but no, I don't know. Again, this was a gift, and I wasn't even looking at buying one myself.
Okay, so a couple $100. Take a look at it. And what's the name of it again?
Levo, Levo.
Levo. Okay, very good. We got another comment here. This is from Stephen Miller from watching on YouTube. Coconut oil has the best absorption rate out of all of the oils in butter. That's good to know, Stephen. That's really good to know. I know I use coconut oil for a lot of things around the house, especially popcorn. Now, that might get too hot for that may destroy because it gets too hot. But that'd be interesting to infuse some coconut oil and make the popcorn, or at least melt the butter and pour it on the popcorn to make some.
Absolutely.
Kind of Thanks.
I feel a movie night coming on. Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I feel a movie night. This is another great book that has a bunch of recipes. More stuff maybe that's not traditional. I mean, he actually goes through, he calls them platinum recipes. So there's so much, from barbecue to dessert, to dinner, drinks, and even entertaining. He's got a party section where there's all kinds of things you can do for parties. But this is a fun book to read as well.
It's Snoop taking some lessons from Martha Stewart.
Yes.
You got Paul Lawler. He said that's very cool. That's great for us men who don't do a lot of cooking. Just press the button and there you go.
Yes, exactly.
So that's another good way of doing things. All right, Rita, anything else you wanted to cover today on this beautiful summer solstice day? And
happy summer solstice.
Yeah, it's finally here. We're here at the solstice time for summertime, and much aloha.
Yes, absolutely.
Anything else you want to cover today? I mean, you've been really helpful. I mean, we got a good understanding of how to make butter at home, many different ways, incorporating it in foods, drinks, pretty complete. And I'm sure there's other ways too of doing it. So if anyone has any other ways, that's one of the other thing I wanted to mention. You're going to do on your YouTube channel, actually making the butter. You're going to do a step-by-step process. Do you know when you're going to do that, or should people?
So we started already today. So I'm already started. I've got my flour here, my grinder. So once we're done here, I'm going to go ahead and go through the process today. Okay. And then have that there. So
go to Rita Lynn 420. I'm going to get us back to this screen here. Go to Rita Lynn 420 at YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to her YouTube channel. Sign up for notifications. Ring the bells, and all that fun stuff. We appreciate you watching today, and feel free to put in any comments. Reach out to either Rita or myself with any questions, and we're very happy that you participated in our fun cannabutter talk today. Thanks again, Rita.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. Love y'all. Love everyone.
All right.